Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody out there in podcast land. You are in tune to another episode of Intrinsic Motivation from a Homie's Perspective. And really excited about our guest today because I was thinking about once upon a time when we all could live together in peace with our animal partners. And in recent years, it seems like we're having more and more animal attacks. Just this week, agents made an arrest for someone smuggling exotic animals overseas, and those could have led to attacks as well. We have a guest that has over 40 years experience dealing with wild animals of all types. Specifically with animal attacks, we're going to learn how we can protect ourselves and learn valuable safety tips, especially in colder months as well. He's the author of 4 Seconds Till Impact, The Skyrocketing Attacks by Predators on Humans. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Bruce Hemming to the podcast. Welcome, Bruce.
Well, thank you for having me on the air. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm happy to speak with you because a little cursory search on YouTube pulls up many animal attacks that have been on recorded video, and I'm sure we're going to continue to see that, and I'm glad we're going to speak with an expert such as yourself to see if we can kind of curb that increasing trend.
Yes, and this is vital information. There was just this past weekend a child attacked in Oregon by a cougar, and luckily the family had 2 dogs that rescued the child, and he only received minor scratches. But that's just one more example of hundreds that are going on, and people really need to be aware. You know, Disney is for TV, and these wild animals aren't friendly when you get out there.
Not at all, and I guess that's why you have that 4 seconds until impact. So before people can pull out their phone or even know what's happening, they're already subdued.
Yeah, that came from many interviews. I interviewed people about their attacks and the survivors and what happened. And over and over and over, repeatedly, people said, you cannot believe how fast it happened. In 4 seconds is real common on bear attacks. You'll see them, you'll maybe hear a growl, maybe not. Maybe they just charge, and repeatedly they say, next thing I knew, I was on the ground being mauled. You can imagine in 4 seconds. But if you train yourself for that and you're ready, there's ways you can defend yourself with a firearm, or bear spray has been effectively used.
I'm also thinking that in the past, these used to be isolated incidents that happened off the beaten path and also in the evening, and you're seeing that it doesn't matter the time of day. It could be broad daylight when these things happen.
Yes. Well, generally, you know, you can't say any specifics for sure, but generally, most attacks happen in the evening hours, but that's, you know, a lot of that has to do with more people are out. Early morning attacks, and attacks happen in broad daylight. So you have to be prepared anytime you go in. And the one case in the book in chapter 5, I was able to get a hold of the National Park in Yellowstone and got their, through Freedom of Information Act, was able to get 5 actual case studies. And I got their full reports, and I detailed it, and I saw a pattern clear as day where first the animals started out with prey testing, and that's where they're not quite sure how to attack us 2-legged humans, and they're easily driven off. In the next stage, they actually taste, so I call it prey tasting. And this time they're a little more aggressive, and they're going to get a taste, they're going to bite into you, get some blood, but they can still be driven off. And the final stage is when they're fully committed to killing and eating you. And unfortunately, I found all 3 of these cases, and it's detailed in there. It's very graphic. In fact, I don't recommend this book for children just because of how graphic the actual cases are inside, especially that chapter. What happens to people when a grizzly bear kills somebody?
Yeah. What made you get? What sparked your interest in this subject matter?
Well, I was noticing people kept saying, a lot of internet experts kept saying, oh, there's only been 12 fatal attacks from cougars. Well, when people say that, they're discounting all these other attacks where the victim survived. So I went searching and I couldn't find any place that had a detailed account of all these attacks, in many cases hundreds of attacks over the last 27 years. And it was startling to me. And then I started doing a bunch of research. I contacted Montana Fish and Wildlife, the National Park Service, the Forest Service, and just the incredible battle you got to read on how the government, they're not keeping any records. In fact, they don't want to keep records on this. They only do on a few cases. And it's some, like the Forest Service, outright just ignored my Freedom of Information Act. They wouldn't even answer me. And I was seeing cases where they'd come across the body and they'd say, killed by animal. That was it. Not what kind of animal, One case I'm thinking of that happened just outside of Yellowstone, which brings in the Forest Service, happened on National Forest Service land. And I asked for the full report on that because they went in with metal detectors because the man was armed with a .45, and they used metal detectors trying to find the bullets. And why they were doing that was if a bullet went through an animal, they might be able to get DNA off that and find out what kind of animal attacked the person. And like I said, they just flat out refused to give me the report. They wouldn't even answer me. I called them and got the runaround. Well, that's not this office, and they kept giving me different phone numbers. And finally, after 20 phone calls, I just gave up.
Do you think that they want people like you to give up because it would hurt tourism dollars?
Exactly. I mean, you can't help. I mean, really, are you going to go to a national park where that, oh, yeah, we've had some missing kids and missing hikers, and we think it's animals killing them, but it's okay, you're safe. People will stop coming. Yeah, it's definitely tourist dollars.
Now, the other sad part that I hate to add is, unfortunately, over the past year or so, they're starting to keep public records of humans that are dying because they are not aware of their environment, so they're taking selfies, and while they're taking selfies, they're walking right off the cliff. So if we have that part of a human happening, what's the best way to prepare for an animal attack if we're not even aware of our surroundings taking a selfie?
Well, that's true, and then we've also had not very many. I think I only found one case where somebody got too close to a grizzly bear trying to get a better picture and was killed. But Canada actually had to put out a safety broadcast and said, quit taking selfies with a bear in the picture.
I'm also laughing because on the Today Show, I believe, or what is it, the Trevor Noah show, the comedy show, and there was a traffic backup on Mount Everest because so many people want to climb it, and there's only people are still dying, but there's still that intent to climb Mount Everest, and so even if it's folklore, which I think you may be coming across of, it's only one bear attack, it happened 30 years ago, that the pros far outweigh the cons of continuing to go to these locations.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's no reason to be afraid. What the whole purpose of my book was to make people aware and to be prepared. And if you're mentally prepared and you actually practice, for instance, drawing your pepper spray, and in my book, I detailed one of the best, in my opinion, pepper spray companies out there. They actually have a holster you put right on your belt, and you can shoot the pepper spray directly from the holster. It's one of the few, if not the only company out there that does that. But if you mentally prepare, you say, this is what I have to do, and you practice it a couple times. They actually even sell a practice canister just for this purpose, or if you have a gun, practice drawing and firing. And I go into details about the pros and cons of having a gun versus pepper spray and vice versa. So, I mean, there's practice is very important. And another case was make sure everybody in your family knows how to use the pepper spray. Because there was a case in Glacier National Park where a father and daughter were attacked by a grizzly bear, and the grizzly bear knocked the can out of the father's hand, and as he was being mauled, the daughter picked up the bottle and couldn't figure out how to use it. So they both were mauled severely. And, 5-minute instruction before they left the trailhead might have saved them $1 million in medical bills, literally.
Right, sure. And you had mentioned the 3 patterns where they're not quite sure how to attack and then they get more aggressive. Is it because that we keep infringing on their natural habitat more and more? There are more and more human activity than before?
Well, that's true. There's more people now, but interesting, what I found out was in 2010, they did a study on America, and they said, we only occupy 6.1% of the land, and that's including up to 10-acre plots. So 97% of the land is still open to the animals. Well, what happened is the last 40 years, ever since, I call them the bunny huggers, to stop the hunting, the animals are our friends, that type of attitude, what happens is people have been, brainwashed into let's stop hunting, and we have allowed their numbers to become vastly overpopulated. And I go into great detail in the book explaining this. And the land has what you call carrying capacity. It will only support so many bears per square mile. Well, actually, a grizzly bear is per 80 square miles. And the males will drive out the younger males. So the younger males have to go find new territory. So they move out. And all these territories are filled up now, so the only place left for them is start coming more and more into people's territory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the reason why I asked that question, here in Georgia, we have the city, right, and then we have suburbs, and then we have exurbia. So what used to be the mountains that people went for vacation, they actually live out there now, and we hear about that in Georgia, about a lot of attacks happening for that reason.
Right. Well, actually, I had a wild case in Georgia where a family was raising raccoons, and they threw them out once they got too big because they started getting aggressive, and they actually broke into the house and attacked the baby. So, and that happened in Georgia. That's in the book. I went into all kinds of strange wild animal attacks that you never heard of. I mean, I grew up in the 60s and the 70s, and a bobcat attacking somebody, but that's happening. Raccoons attacking a kid, that's happening. And it all comes back to these animals are grossly overpopulated, and we need to have more hunting and get more control of the population.
Yeah, that's a really good point that you bring up, because I was thinking about my neighbors to the south, those lovely folks in Florida, and in the news, I think it was this weekend, a crocodile had broken into a house through the pool, and the lady comes downstairs and the crocodile's in the middle of the kitchen, asking for breakfast. So, so I wanted to ask you about, because in a lot of these, like you said, they get these exotic animals when they're babies, and when they get too big, they just put them in the swamp or flush them, and then now they're out in the wild, and a lot of havoc ensues.
Well, it's funny. I did a search on Florida versus Louisiana. You never heard of alligators attacks in Louisiana, but you hear about them in Florida all the time. And again, it comes back to the same old story. Why? Because they overprotect them and they're grossly overpopulated. When they're breaking into people's houses, I think we can safely say there's too many.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what about the other side as far as permitting and permits to hunting? And when we hear about these busts and arrests, the perpetrator was aware of the permits, but they didn't agree with it, and so they, in essence, smuggled these animals either on the plane or through other means. So is that a growing problem that you're seeing on your end as well?
No, well, you're talking more exotic from overseas, where people are trying to bring in weird snakes and lizards and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's I don't know. I focus the book's all about North America. America, Canada, where I stayed right in North America, because that's what I'm an expert on. I'm not, I don't know anything about Asia or Indonesia to comment for sure on what's going on with their animal population.
Sure. And are you also seeing one particular species that are more aggressive than others?
Well, the one that most people really overlook is black bears, because and it's a frequent myth that's still out there today that all you need is a broom to scare a black bear away. And that's true for some of them. But what they found recently, and again, in the last 20-some years, is they're seeing an aggressive male black bear that is hunting humans. And they're called predatory attacks. And what that means, when they say predatory attack, that means he's trying to kill and eat the person, which is different than a defensive attack when you walk up, say, on a sow with her cubs, when the people, are attacked because she was defending her cubs. That's called a defensive attack. When they're trying to kill and eat you, that's predatory attack. And what they found, again, it's in the book in detail, these young males, 93% of the predatory attacks are coming from these, I think it's 88%, you have to forgive my memory, are these young male black bears. In fact, in the Smoky Mountains, I found a case that really blew my mind. Was like a 50-pound cub was trying to kill a young boy. I don't remember his age, and they physically were fighting it out. Blood flying everywhere, and the father had to get in and actually kill the bear to save his son. It's a cub. So, yeah, there's some wild stories, in the book that just blew my mind.
Yeah. So I'm thinking for the human aspect, at least in the cities, we have a ton of cameras everywhere on the TV shows. They solve crimes because they got a glimpse at the bank, half a block away. Is there any type of surveillance that's happening in some of these areas so we're more informed about areas that we're frequenting?
Good question. I don't believe they're doing anything in the national forest. At least I haven't heard. I mean, they might be, but basically what they do is people in your national parks, people report different, sightings of grizzly bears or cougars or any encounters. Well, they're supposed to, which doesn't happen all the time. And they then when you come into the parks, they're supposed to give you a warning and say, hey, along this trail there's been grizzly bear sightings, or one person was charged but wasn't attacked, that sort of thing. They're supposed to inform you before you go out.
Yeah, because here in Georgia, I have a lot of friends that go deer hunting, and different seasons, they're alerted that they can only kill a certain amount because they know the number there and they don't want them to go extinct. So I'm just wondering how progressive other states are when you factor in hunting.
Well, they all have a biologist, and his or her job is to guesstimate, based on scientific evidence, how many bears, for instance, are in this area. And they say, okay, this area will support, for instance, 2,000 bears. And we're at 2,500. So this year we need to take 500 out. So there's still 2,000 bears left. But what happens when the bears are hunted, they, of course, wise up real quick and say, oh, them humans are bad news. And they back off.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's an actual safety factor. And that works for all animals. When they're hunted aggressively, they learn to avoid humans, and it's a safety factor. So, yes, they have biologists in every state. In fact, I go into great detail in the book on the different states and how they set how many populations. Some states, I think Montana was like taking 8% of the bear populations per year. Some states were taking 17%. It just depends on their biologist and the survival rate of the cubs. So the higher their population growth is, the more aggressive. And each state's different how they do it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so when you talk about, you're talking about in your bio, you're talking about the colder months are the time that you should really be aware. I mean, you should be aware at all times, but it seems that either are the animals preparing for winter, and that's why you should be more aware in the colder months.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, bears especially go into they have to consume 20,000 calories a day. So they become very aggressive over food sources. And that's where you see, especially like last year, there was a guy killed in Wyoming. And this was late October, early November. And they were packing out an elk where they went in, they shot it the day before, and they went in early morning. And all they had was a pistol, and they were trying to load up the elk on the horses, and, they had quartered it up. And they were attacked, and the guide had a pistol, and he threw it to the client that he was guiding, and the client didn't know how to use it. And it comes back again where 5 minutes of preparation beforehand might have saved his life. And the gun also had a fully loaded magazine, but there was not a bullet in the chamber. So even if the guy unfamiliar with it pulled the trigger, it just would have went click. And he panicked and ran off and tried to get cell phone service on top of the hill to call for help, and the guide was killed. Very unfortunate case.
Absolutely. When you talk about the predatory attacks, and then you're also talking about a bear in this case needs to consume 20,000 calories a day. Are there any instances where you're finding that they're attacking in groups versus one-on-one?
Not on bears, but on coyotes and wolves, yes. And that's another one that a lot of people don't know. They're still under that illusion that wolves don't attack people. And I believe I have 38 cases in the book where people have been attacked by wolves. And there's a really bad one that happened in Alaska, and I got the Alaskan field report, and that took a lot of research to find that report. And I finally got it, and it was a pack of 10 wolves that attacked a lone lady that was out jogging. And that's another one that's just horrific reading. It's very graphic on what happened to that poor woman. And same with coyotes. I had a case that happened up in Canada, in Nova Scotia. A young 19-year-old lady out for a walk was attacked by 3 coyotes, and it was an incredible attack. She fought them for like a half an hour. People finally came. They tried driving the coyotes off, 3 men, and the coyotes backed off but stood their ground and were trying to take their dead, well, she wasn't dead yet, but their prey victim back over. And in fact, the Mounties arrived with a shotgun, and he shot one of them, and that finally broke the attack, and they finally left. They got the lady to the hospital. She was still alive, but she died shortly afterwards. And just horrific case. So, yeah. And pack animals, you can imagine 10 wolves, nobody'd stand a chance without a firearm. Or 3 coyotes. And I got a case in Colorado where a man was walking that was attacked by a pack of coyotes. Just horrific attack, but he was able to fight them off and make it to safety. So yes, pack attacks happen, but not with bears, none that I have found, or with cougars, but with wolves and coyotes, yes.
And what about the argument, I know it's more of a political argument about for hunting, using a rifle versus a semi-automatic assault rifle. In the case of wolves, I would think that you need something automatic versus a handgun that shoots off one at a time.
Well, automatics are illegal unless you have a special permit. But just a semi-automatic rifle with a 30-round magazine would definitely feel more comforting for the pack of wolves than a single-shot bolt action.
Because you're saying, like, if you might scare one off, but if they're a pack, then they may, with the strength in numbers. So I would think they would still come at you.
Well, actually, I've interviewed hunters that have told me that they have come and shot at wolves coming at them, and what freaked them out was, normally when you shoot, the animal runs away. And this guy told me that he had 5 wolves coming in, and he shot and dropped one, and the other 4 just kept coming at him, and it really freaked him out because he thought the other 4 would run off.
Right.
And he emptied his gun and finally drove the others off, but it spooked him really bad.
Rightfully so. I don't know anyone that'll pull out a cigarette and a beer at that time. So hopefully we don't come into that. You also have ideas for revamping the animal conservation system. So we've established that there's an overgrowth, and hence we've had an increase in tax. How can we cull the herd, as they say?
Well, it's real simple. I mean, it's really not that complicated at all. We just have to increase the tags. I mean, Colorado's been having all kinds of problems with bears, from nuisance attacks to where nuisance means they're coming in and tearing up your garbage or breaking into your chicken coop and killing your chickens, that sort of thing. And again, it's because they're overpopulated. So they can increase the tags 3-4 years in a row, or whatever their biologists determine needs to be done, based on science, and cull the herd down. And like in grizzly bears, they need to open a hunting season, for God's sakes, in Wyoming and Montana and Idaho. It's way overdue. And that's another case. Our government, lovely people that they are, I just wanted to know how many times they had changed the goal. See, what these biologists have done that work for the federal government is they said, well, as soon as the bears hit 400, we're going to open a hunting season and let 40 be culled every year. Mm-hmm. Well, once they hit 400, they changed it. No, we want it at 500 and then 600. And it changed 6 or 7 times. And so in 1990, they were supposed to open the first hunting season on grizzly bears. And now we're at 2019, and there's still no hunting season on them. Yeah, and it's totally ridiculous.
So how does that work? Does that work on the federal level or the state level as far as a response and galvanizing the troops to spread the word about this?
Well, it's real complicated, of course. The federal government, the grizzly bears out west are under Endangered Species Act, so they have control. And the black bears are under state management, so they have control. So it depends on which animal species you're talking about and whether or not they're listed under the Endangered Species Act or not. Which, it's, of course, complicated. But you have to look at, what's the motivation for the biologists not to have a hunting season? And I tried to find that out. And I believe, this is my guess, that the biologists want to keep their job. And when they work for the feds, once the grizzly bears have been recovered and removed from the endangered species list, those biologists would be out of a job. So to protect their job, they just changed the goal number, for instance. That shows you on the federal side. On the state side, the people can put pressure on Fish and Wildlife or Fish and Game, whatever they're called in each particular state, and demand more animals be culled to cure that. Did that answer your question?
It did. It did. Thank you. It seems like on each state you need to look. How would they contact a specific department, or how would that work?
Right. Well, each department, each state's got a different name. Like I was originally from Michigan, and there it was the Department of Natural Resources. Okay. And Idaho, for instance, it's Idaho Fish and Game. So to find out, it's real simple. You just look up whatever state, like Georgia, you type in buy hunting license, and it will tell you where, and that will be their website. It'll be their Fish and Wildlife or Fish and Game or whatever they call themselves. And that's who you'd contact on their website, or they give you a phone number to call to find out. Like, for instance, I think I talked to a lot of people. Colorado was, I believe, Division of Wildlife.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. And I want to address a myth. I remember as a child watching cartoons that if a bear comes around, you play dead, and then you're okay. What's your take on that?
Well, sometimes, and again, that's where this book will actually help you knowing the difference between a predatory and a defensive attack. Now, in a black bear, you fight. You fight like the devil's trying to drag you to hell. Forgive my language. And you fight because most times they're trying to kill you, to eat you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in a grizzly bear, if you see the mom with the cubs and she charges you, if you can't neutralize her with a gun or bear spray, then that's when you want to play dead. Because she, most of the time, again, most of the time, nothing's for sure, she'll maul you a little and leave. Because all she's trying to do is neutralize you as a threat to her cubs. And once she feels that you're no longer a threat, she'll leave you there. But not always, because there's one case I'm thinking of where she didn't stop the attack and she planned on killing the person she attacked. So that's why I have to speak in general terms, because nothing always works. And again, that's where proper training and practice will help immensely.
Sure, and I want to get into that with the training and practice, but I'm just to answer your point. I mean, I can play dead pretty good, but if I get mauled light, right? If she feels, oh, he's dead, well, let me maul him a little bit. I mean, how could you still play dead? Because it's not going to tickle once she touches you. Period.
Yeah, you're not going to be laughing, that's for sure.
Right. How do I still play dead and she's mauling me lightly?
Well, she's not going to maul you lightly. You're going to feel some pain. But the people I talked to that have lived through that said that they literally bit their tongue and forced themselves not to move. And that's when she quit or paused, and she didn't fight or scream or do anything, and it stopped. So, I mean, if that's a last case, but again, on like a cougar, you never, ever play dead.
Right.
When a cougar attacks, they're planning on eating you, period. No exceptions. And that's, well, I don't know if you want to get into that right now, but guns used on cougars, 88% of the time, stop the attack. As soon as the shot's fired, either it kills the animal or just hearing the shot drives them off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because, as you're talking, I'm thinking in each scenario, the title of your book, 4 seconds until impact. So you have to think on your toes. And my next question is, what's the earliest age that young adults could go out there to the parks and such? You're mentioning little children and panicking. I don't think they should be in those environments at all.
Well, I mean, it's not up to us to be parents for everybody, but it is up to us. In fact, I get into that. One of the things, especially for cougars, is when kids are playing, they have that high-pitched squeal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking young kids between 3 and 10 years old. That
Right.
high-pitched squeal actually brings in predators. It's like a call. And you'll hear a lot of cases where I'm thinking of a case that I detailed in the book where this young 3-year-old boy came up missing in Colorado. And they intensive search, hundreds of people for a week long and never found anything. And then the next year or the year after, they found his hat and sweater and shoes. And a cougar grabbed them and ran straight uphill. And that's where you need to train your children, too. Tell them, this isn't cartoons. The animals aren't your friends. And if you do get grabbed by any animal, scream. for help and don't stop screaming. Just keep screaming for help. It's very important, especially if you live anywhere where there's cougars. So parents have saved their children more than once. Again, I have one case in there that happened in Canada. And it's just horrific. This mother literally fought the cougar to death. She died to save her children. I mean, incredible story.
It sounds like that's where the mother gets her super strength that you hear about when they lift cars, when they feel that their children are in danger.
Oh, in this case, she fought the cougar for an hour.
Mm-hmm.
She had an older boy. It attacked the younger, I don't remember the age for sure, say 3 or 4 year old. And the older son took the other 2 kids and ran for help and got help. And then a guy with a shotgun came back and tried to save the mother. And it took an hour for that time frame. And she was still fighting the cougar when the man arrived. Just incredible. So, yeah, that was a mother's love.
Absolutely. And it's one thing that I learned talking to you about that high-pitched squeal. I was at the Jersey Shore over the weekend, and we had kids with us. And every time they squealed, the what do you call them? Not the pelicans, the seagulls kept coming by, and we were like, if you stop squealing, and they would stop coming. It was like they were chasing the kids because the kids were squealing.
Yeah, they were looking for seagulls. They'll come in and think maybe something's being attacked, and there'll be pieces for them to eat, to be blunt. That's that should be a good example and stick in your head from now on, I bet.
Good point. So there's some people that they have different ways of learning. Some people read, some people are auditory learners, some people are visual learners. And after they get your book, are they set in stone, or do you also teach classes?
I used to teach wilderness survival classes, but I don't anymore. But I mean, if I had a big enough demand, yeah, I would definitely come in and teach. And also, since you bring that up, one thing I found that really has increased that I should mention is people that camp in a tent. Mm-hmm. And I have several cases in the book detailed where people have been attacked in the tent as they're sleeping. And one of the safety features I found was a lightweight electric fence that you can put around your tent. And the manufacturer I interviewed, who's in the book, he said that it was used up in the Arctic and it actually drove off a polar bear.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I didn't know that. So you can actually, when you're going out camping, you can buy an electric fence that you can put around your campsite.
Yeah, pretty amazing. And I don't remember, but it seems to me it was right around 5 pounds and worked on 2 D-cell batteries. It was incredible. I'm sure it has a capacitor inside, and that's what gives it a high jump voltage-wise to knock the critter, to give them a second thoughts that this is the wrong camp to come into.
Well, it gives you more time. That's why I'm glad you brought that up, because, again, I just keep thinking, that 4 seconds before impact. And I think of the dogs when you have the electric fence around your house where they keep testing it and then they're able to withstand the pain and get through. If the wild animal's going through this electric fence, it gives you time to make sure your ammunition and spray and everything else is ready.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely wake you up when you hear them yell and pain. you're right. I actually found a study that I was pretty surprised. I believe it was in India. They talked about how even electric fences around houses did not prevent deaths 100% of the time because the animals learned to overcome the pain and entered anyways and still killed and ate people.
Yeah, that was my next question. It keeps the dog in and the dog's barking. It's not keeping that bear to come into, like you said, become a nuisance and knock your trash over. That doesn't deter them?
It does for a while. It just depends if they really like that or not. If they really like the food that's in your trash can, sooner or later they're going to learn. And it's like all non-lethal methods eventually fail. They'll work for so long. And I think what we're going to find out is these bears, maybe in the next 10, 20 years, these bears are going to learn to overcome the bear spray. They're going to learn to stop, shut their eyes, and shut their mouth so they can take the blast better and then charge through it after you get done spraying. Comforting thought, hey?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I can't wait for that movie to come out, but this sounds like real life. And I did have another question about the electric fence, because the electric fence is really for Fido, right? So with the bear, who weighs a lot more, or some of these other animals, they would be unfazed by some of these fences, I would think.
Well, no, this company that I list in the book, like I said, they actually made it, and it was tested on that polar bear. So, I mean, it's enough to drive them off, but how many more times, animals are going to learn once they get by that, just like a dog's going to learn. It's just going to take more exposure to it until they finally learn how to bypass it to get to you. But, yeah, right now, probably, like I said, I'm guessing they'll work. Well, they're not real widespread yet. So maybe it will work for the next 20 years.
Sure. Well, and I'm a big tech geek, so I got to stay here for just a few more seconds, okay, if you don't mind. So since I didn't know that the electric fence existed before our conversation, I'm wondering if they have like a mobile fence. Like if you're walking around, then you have sort of a TV movie force field while you're walking around, because when you're saying, and the people you interviewed, they said the next thing I knew. So they're sneaking up to you. It's not like they're giving you time to prepare.
Right. Actually, the company that I highlight, they have a video where this grizzly bear is charging a person, and it's literally like 3 seconds. There's no growl. There's nothing. You see the bear. He charges, and boom, you're on the ground. So, I mean, it would be great for a techie to come up with maybe a high-powered stun gun, taser type thing to work on bears, but I haven't heard of anything like that. But hopefully somebody's working on it. That would be awesome.
Yeah, even a city slicker like me would go out in the woods if I had that. So the disclaimer was the book is very graphic, so it's not for children. But I'd like for you to take the time to talk about the book a little bit more, and how they can get the book, and how they can get in touch with you if they want to know more information about wilderness survival.
Oh, okay. You can go to my website. It's www.snare-trap-survive.com. Or the book is available, of course, on my website, and Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kaboo, Apple, a host of other ones. Whichever your favorite ebook reader is, it's probably on there. So, I mean, Amazon is the easiest one to find, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Or you just go to my website. You can search 4 seconds to impact Bruce Buckshot Hemming, and it comes right up. And Google search, it'll be like I don't know how many, the first 10 probably.
Mm-hmm. I was wondering with the book, it'd be a great read, but since we're talking about animals and noises and having this visual, have you ever thought of doing an audio version and having the sounds of the animals when they attack?
Actually, I was thinking, but I think the liability would be too much insurance-wise. What I was thinking of was actually opening up like a gun range in the woods where you're
Mm-hmm.
walking with your pistol on a hike and have like a bear growling and have, a plastic form bear charge you on like a rail
Mm-hmm.
and give you that 4 seconds so you could actually practice in real life what it would be like. And it'd probably save some people's lives, but nowadays with the insurance costs, last time I checked, for just having a shooting range, the cost was pretty astronomical just to buy the insurance.
Well, he gave you his contact information, so if there are any insurers that listen to this podcast, you know who to get in touch with and work out some good rates. It sounds like it's a service that's definitely needed.
Well, I think it would save lives, but people would panic and maybe shoot themselves in the foot or in the thigh. And yeah, it's easy to talk about, when you're nice and comfortable. What I would do is pull out my gun but when you hear that growl and all of a sudden that bear's bearing down on you, the life changes real suddenly.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Well, you have just been attuned to another episode of Intrinsic Motivation from a Homie's Perspective. This is Hamza and Bruce Hemming. It was a pleasure speaking with you. Let's stay in touch.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me on the air. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.